Welcome to this month's episode of Payroll and Prosecco. My name is Mel Hassib and I am the founder of the Payroll Agency and your host here on Payroll and Prosecco. With nearly a decade of experience in recruitment, specializing in payroll, I've made it my mission to connect top talent with the right opportunities across Australia. So this podcast is all about real talk with payroll professionals, industry insights, and a little fun along the way. So grab a glass of bubbles and let's dive into the world of payroll. Welcome, Brendon.
Thank you.
Some of you may know Brendon from the GPA, where you started to sort of introduce analytics to the world of payroll and how it can help businesses. And we kind of got a little snippet there. My friend Aaron actually was the one that said, you need to get Brendon on because he's got a lot more to talk about. So I was like, yep, no, I agree. So I was like, look, I would love for you to come on and talk about analytics because I think it's a really interesting part of payroll that people don't really know anything about. So please introduce yourself and tell us how you got into payroll and your history and the world of analytics.
Yeah, thank you, Mel. It's great to be here. So I think a lot of people do know me from either the GPA summit that I presented at back in July, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously I've been in payroll for 15 plus years now in many different industries and many different guises. So safe to say, and I think the classic joke in all the previous podcasts is that I fell into payroll.
Mm-hmm.
But I have the privilege of having fallen into it twice. So I started my career in payroll probably about 15 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
I just completed a financial services certificate, and I actually went into a recruitment payroll. So doing the back book, the
temp payroll.
Yeah.
Which agency was that?
So that was Smalls Recruiting.
Oh, there you go.
So they had people all through Australia. They specialised in state gov as well at the time. And there's a lot of changes there. But the analytics piece actually came a bit sooner for me because I've always loved computers and technology. Grew up with like computers pre-PC days. Was always mucking about with that sort of stuff and always had a knack and an interest for it. I obviously was when I approached payroll and started getting into it and started learning more and more about it. I started to kind of go, okay, there's systems here that aren't working properly, and there's a lot of information here that we're really generating. I then, because I was very passionate about that data piece, I actually made a deliberate decision to leave payroll for a while, and I did what was called supplier compliance at Lendlease, and that was making sure that all of our suppliers, weren't Phoenix. There's no Phoenix activity. Making sure that they were financially robust enough to do the scale of work that they needed to, which was a great time. That's actually where I actually properly met my current manager, Val Flight, which I think many people know as well. And then, they went through a big restructure at Lendlease. They did a lot of improving of their processes. And I was incredibly fortunate to get in touch with Rowan Geddes at PwC, who runs the payroll advisory practice there. And that was probably the quickest job offer I've ever gotten. Rowan is absolutely amazing. I really got into that. And this was around about 2018 when people were really starting to pay attention. This was when a lot of the big stories were starting to come around payroll compliance and remediation. Got a real great opportunity to work with a lot of different clients on those sorts of problems. And the recurring theme was, particularly with large organizations, but small and medium enterprises had this issue as well, where they could process payroll. You had some very passionate payroll people in there, but they didn't really have the resources or the training to kind of understand all of that data that they were actually generating. So a big part of us coming in was actually being able to provide that extra edge and that extra piece of knowledge to build large scale models to do 15, 20, 25 years sometimes worth of calculations through a historical payroll. And everything just kind of built from there. That was a really great time. And then, I moved on to other things. And then now currently in my role at Westpac, we're actually very much spinning up this dedicated payroll analytics practice, because we are generating a whole lot of data. we've implemented a lot of great systems which actually really boost that compliance edge. So yeah, and there's just a huge need for people to come to that with that expertise, with that knowledge, with that context of payroll, to drive those business outcomes that we want.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously we talked about payroll's not just a back office function anymore. It very much is the seat at the boardroom, and we're constantly talking about how can payroll benefit the business, obviously outside of the biggest thing, which is paying your employees. That's the number one thing, and that's you wouldn't have an effective business if you didn't pay people, right? No one's gonna do their job if you don't get paid,
as a rule.
Yeah, right. Do you know what I mean? So it does obviously make sense, but how can we justify the increased costs? Because payroll's not cheap anymore. The systems are not cheap. People are not cheap, so,
and they shouldn't be.
They should not be. But, it seems like it's climbing like hundreds of K a year. So how can we give back to the business and prove the worth outside of just obviously the BAU and projects and all that kind of stuff? How can we give back to businesses? Is with this, right? And we'll go into obviously this throughout the podcast. As you can potentially see today, we don't have any Prosecco because I'm not drinking it. I just don't drink alcohol anymore. And I think it's a bit of a false kind of promise.
And, I don't know.
Coffee. So we do have cups of coffee. So apologies to anyone we disappointed by not consuming alcohol in this session. Okay, so we start off. What you did when we talked about before. You said a really important quote, and I think that's really important. Payroll sees everything. Yeah. And I guess one of my first questions is how can we translate the insights that you can see via payroll into insights that the business will understand? Now, obviously, I've written in big capital letters here as a note, money is number one, right? But I guess for the community to really, if they were going to put this into their business, if they were going to sit on the table and say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. CEO,
yes.
I've been thinking about analytics for the business. How would you say that, we can sell this to the business?
I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like there's that those dollars and cents is what gets you attention, right? Like we've seen this as well with the articles that you see in the news about, wage trust and all of that, that the numbers are what really get people riled up. And yeah, payroll do see everything, and it's down to the nth degree, right? Like people are putting in their timesheets every day. So you're getting that time and date information. You're getting like, all that roster information as well. Like that's all got to come together in order to pay someone correctly. So you definitely have that kind of, first point of view in terms of, where the business is spending its money on all of its staff costs, right? Because that's payroll's that rubber hitting the road, right? Like, we talk about this is people getting paid, right? If we're not paying people, they're probably not going to show up.
No.
And if you're not paying them correctly, then that can sort of build all sorts of mistrust. But in terms of getting in front of, your boards, your C-suite, your business owners, it is very much about going, well, where you're seeing potential inefficiencies or potential compliance issues that are leading to overpayments or at least over rostering. So I'll give an example of that. I had a client, back in the day where they were trying to figure out their staff billing, and they're going, there's all this extra money going out the doors. We're not sure what's going on. People are getting a lot of overtime. And it turned out they had an award, like a historical award that was basically saying after 38 hours, you get overtime. And their shifts were 9-hour shifts. So what they were doing is they were picking up 4 shifts and then picking up a 5th shift on the Friday, which was all overtime.
A nice bit of overtime pay.
Yeah. And when we went back to it, it was something like, 100,000 plus a month or something.
Wow.
Like it was a huge amount of dollars for that company. And I said, well, yeah, you're rostering people in such a way that's really inefficient. And you're seeing that, be realized in your pay results, right? Where all this extra overtime is being paid and your payroll bill is here, where it could be here if you either hired a couple more people, used your casual staff more effectively, or even just more effectively rostered your existing staff.
Yeah.
And that's coming from pay result
100%
data, right? Like that's not coming from HR or a reward or somewhere where they're just going, well, people earn X amount of salary, or they're this or they're this role level. It's coming from they're putting in those shifts, and that the payroll system by rights is paying those shifts.
For sure.
So, and it's doing, most modern systems now will interpret awards and enterprise agreements to an extent. It's seeing the shift in there and going, that person's worked more than 38 hours. That's now all overtime.
Yeah.
And then,
yeah, because we're talking about overpayments, but before we came in the room and we were saying that you can't you can't force people to pay the money back. And honestly, what did you say? For as many people that get underpaid, as many people get overpaid as well. And it's not obviously where you have to force the change. If you underpay someone, you have to correct it and pay them the correct amount, but they don't have to pay you the money back.
Not necessarily, no. Like usually, like obviously not legal advice. Please check your individual agreements.
This is not legal. Yeah.
But yeah, like typically that can be very hard to recover, and businesses might get complacent about that as well. We've seen that where they just go, well, look, we've made a mistake for X, Y, Z. We're not going to recover that money, and that can add up.
Just year in, year out. Yeah.
And you you have all these leaks everywhere. And I think it is very true that where you see underpayments in any organization, you could probably say that the overpayments are equivalent in worst cases, but at least I'd say maybe 50%. So if you're seeing those numbers in the media of underpayments, that company's probably overpaying as well, and that money is just extra cost for no real benefit.
I know people. One of my girlfriends actually. She, her whole career, all she does is contracting. I can't say where she works, but so she does. She only works the hours to get the additional fee. So I'm trying to explain what I'm trying to say. So she doesn't take a permanent contract. So she's guaranteed the set hours. She works all overtime hours basically, and she builds it. And I was like, how have you got away with doing a whole career on this? Because it doesn't seem financially viable for the business. I just don't know how. But every week she'll just book in these overtime shifts, and then she's paid double. And then she basically works maybe 30 hours a week on this thing, but she earns almost double what she would have earned if she only worked the standard hours.
And it's very likely that business has no idea, right? They're just probably seeing a big number to say, these are our overheads, these are our staff costs.
I guarantee you I guarantee it. They'd have no idea that she does it.
And, and this is one of the things I really want to start to build out is kind of going, as you dive deeper into payroll data, you can tease out those things where you have these sort of discrepancies almost. Because, those sorts of things, like if someone is, I'm not going to say abusing the system because I'm sure that's not what they're doing.
No, she's for sure is doing it. She loves it and she doesn't care.
But not only is that an extra cost to a business, but that can also drive, poor employee morale as well, right? Like if they know she's doing it and they're kind of going, well, I want to take the high road and be honest.
Yeah.
You're looking at scenarios where, people get, can get quite upset sometimes when they're going, well, why am I doing this work? I know this person's going to get double
for sure.
much, because pay transparency is absolutely a thing now. Like you can't stop people from talking about their salaries and what they're on.
Yep.
So you want to be able to get it right and get, be able to be as granular with it as you can, because that's where you're going to start to drive a lot more insights.
Yeah, for sure.
Like the rostering example I gave, you see all sorts of things which are inconsistencies in data, like people claiming allowances on the wrong day, people putting 24 hours in a day, doing all those catch-up things.
Yeah.
It'd be remiss of me to say that, most people who aren't payroll people aren't really great at payroll and
they don't realize. Well, that's what the note that we put here is the standardizing admin side of payroll is huge with the result of that you found with analytics, because it means that if you want to explain what you meant by the standardizing of the admin side.
Yeah, so it's very much about, I'm a big believer in, you minimize the errors that people can make in terms of saying, okay, these are standard processes, you stick to this, you can't go outside this. Because as soon as you start to do all these variations, which I know payroll people every day you're asked, can we just do this? I want to do this thing a little bit differently. And this is where you see a lot of errors. And you see a lot of things that go, like one of the big challenges we have in analytics is around all these things look really weird. But then when you talk to payroll, so it's like, oh, I've got this email, or, someone called me, or, I got a chat message or something to say this is a variation, which just, that this is another thing that I think businesses need to be very cognizant of and very aware that this can also lead to issues, right? Which in the best case scenario, you're just going to have potential overpayments. In the worst case, this is where fraud can happen.
Well, this is why I did the post the other day on saying yes to people and how you have to protect your payroll, because you start deviating from the standardization of this is what you do, this is how we're going to do things, and then they go, oh, can you just do this one time, and then sometimes people forget to change it back, or they don't do an audit, they're not checking that, oh, we have to go back to what we were doing before, I'll allow you one time, and then they never change it, and then before they know it, they've overpaid someone for the next 6 to 12 months because they've changed, you know what I mean? So no, it's like rules and regulations are there for a reason, to protect your payroll and protect the business.
Yeah, and analytics does give you another layer to that, because I think, most people listening to this, if they've been in payroll for any length of time, will know, it's a very different compliance landscape. There's a lot of focus on it now from Fair Work particularly. But yeah, again, I talked to that piece in terms of saying you can have high level data and high level reports and say, this is the money going out, these are the things we care about. And as you dive into those things, this is where you start to see those things become really obvious. And you go, well, what happened here? Like, our pay run was at $10,000, $20,000 more this run. What happened? Like, why was it different? And then being able to then go, well, yeah, this cost us X amount because someone didn't follow the process, or someone made an arbitrary decision that they shouldn't have. That can be very powerful, instead of just saying, well, going to someone and saying, well, people are doing the wrong thing, and it's eating up time in my team. You go, boom, report, $20,000 gone.
Yeah, for sure.
What do you want to do about it? I mean, I think it's one of those things as well where the more data you have, the more insights you're going to get. And I talk about this as well in terms of the payroll kind of being that center of excellence and center of data, which is something I spoke about at GPA, to say that, well, payroll's got that very granular pay results. You'll have timesheets, work schedules. You obviously have salary and assignment data. Like, there's a lot of data already living in that payroll sphere just to get people paid. So, you're dealing with that day in, day out. Payroll people are going to have the context of that data, first off, that a HR or a reward or, a dedicated data professional who's spent their life maybe focusing on different types of data won't have. But then as you can bring in some of those sources, your insights can become exponential. So I think we were talking about things like, okay, if you start to look at some of the HR stuff and some of the EAP stuff, combining that with payroll and, like, say, leave transactions and things like that, you can start to kind of derive insights about, employees' engagement and feelings, like if people are starting to take a lot of sick days.
What's it doing?
What do you want to do?
I don't know what happened there. We'll go on to the next thing. So, I mean, beyond compliance, how can payroll analytics help improve processes? So, I think when we were talking about it before, we kind of spoke about how if you're noticing the same error or queries that are coming up, so if you get every multiple employees every single month are saying, to bring into the attention of the payroll team, oh, I don't know how to do this, or they're making the same errors. Could this be an education piece? Can we then say to the business, well, actually, we need to roll out better education around the timesheeting or whatever it is? But do you want to talk a little bit about that side stuff?
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, I think because payroll does get, usually a huge volume of queries, because people rightly are concerned about their pay for all sorts of reasons. But what I've found in the past is that you're not only getting that volume of queries, but people, who are not payroll experts, don't blame them for that. Payroll's amazing. They should learn all about it. But yeah, they typically just want to sort their pay out, right? Like, I mean, we talk about this in banking as well, that, it's people's money, there obviously can be quite concerning depending on what that scenario is. And you can get into some quite sensitive areas, but people won't always know exactly what they're asking for. And we've seen that where, like, you say, okay, I'm going to implement like some ticketing system to manage all of this. And I've seen this in all sorts of places. ServiceNow is very popular, I think, these days in terms of managing those sorts of things, but there are other systems are available. But people will say, okay, I'm going to have these categories. That might be not enough. There might be too many. Like, there's a bit of dark art around that. But then, your employees will just submit whatever gets them the quickest answer, right? Like, we know that classic thing where everyone marks that every query they have as urgent. I've seen things where people just have very basic questions and then they just label it as, oh, I didn't get paid, because they think that's going to get attention.
Which is so cheeky, like, and then you're just there panicking, like, oh God, I didn't pay these people, and there's like a $10 difference,
which is a nightmare for a payroll person, right? If they think they haven't paid someone at all, or mistyped it in bank details or something like that. But the other thing as well, which is something I've seen in a few places, is that people will submit one query, but it's actually 5 queries. And what you run into there, like your big risk is that you're answering 5 queries, but you're only measuring 1. So when people inevitably do those stats on...
Sorry, we're in technical issues. So we were talking about queries and they were alerting that they hadn't been paid.
Yeah, so I think what we were talking about is ultimately what it means, and sometimes where people are submitting multiple queries in the one email request, which we do see as well, that you're doing a whole lot of extra work that's probably not getting recorded properly. And you can go like, well, payroll's actually only handling this level of queries when it's actually, much higher, or, the time it's taking to do those queries is much more because they're misclassified, or, there's something else going on there. So I'm very kind of passionate about making sure that you're categorizing those queries correctly. And, if employees are not, then we're actually looking at some machine learning techniques we're in our team at the moment. And I know others are implementing things like AI chatbots and things that are just kind of like just smash the keyboard and it categorizes your query. Because then I think taking the analytics lens to that extreme, then you can actually then take that data and then go, okay, these are the types of queries we're getting. This is what people are actually asking, not what they say they're asking. Because you might end up with a different solution, right? Because you say, well, everyone's logging leave queries just because it gets attention, but what they're really concerned about is like parental leave or a specific leave policy. Then you go, well, okay, then it's not about them not knowing how to submit leave properly. It's about they don't understand the policy,
yes,
which is a different outcome. And then you can kind of say, well, now we're saving time and money and effort because we're targeting the right problem.
Yeah, because we were talking about all the other things that come along, obviously, with the privacy level of was it human capital privacy and things like that around, domestic violence and things like that, which obviously, you have certain ways that you have to make the reporting safe for the people, safe for the business, and that the person's looked after and cared for, and that comes around with the analytics as well.
Yeah, maybe at a risk of going on a bit of a tangent here, like I think it can be crazy because I've seen this in organizations where payroll, generating data, and then it just all gets shipped off to some data warehouse that some, a team, with a, special data label or something else says, we're the experts on data, so we're going to build all the reports and do stuff. And inevitably what you find is those visualizations, those dashboards are just not great. No disrespect to those people because I'm sure they're brilliant, but they don't get the context of payroll and what that data is actually telling them. Because you can create these dashboards, they're great, but all they're doing is presenting that data back to you. Really, like you can do measures and all sorts of wonderful transformations, but at the end of the day, it's payroll data, right? So you don't want, you wouldn't. That's that classic saying of just like, you don't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree. Because
no, I've never heard that.
It's I think it's attributed to Einstein, but I could be very wrong. It could have misled me on that. But the saying goes is that if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll believe it's stupid its whole life.
Oh yeah, okay, I get that. I get the analogy.
So but it's the same thing where you come back to it's kind of like, well, you send these things out, that people are going to present the data in a certain way. It's not going to be great. People aren't going to understand it. People are going to say, well, payroll stuff has no value. And you get into this cycle where it's just like, well, why bother? Why are we looking at these dashboards? Why would we look at this data? Who cares? It's just payroll.
Well, it's the well-being of your employees is the ultimate goal of like understanding the payroll data and understanding, as you said, if they've got issues that maybe aren't as easy to access. You said they're putting, a leave thing because they couldn't find the thing on parental leave, or they're whether it needs to be more education or the staff aren't okay. Like we were talking about the example of using payroll analytics to understand how many justifiable hours were overtime. If you've got a whole department that's logging 60 hours a week every single week when they're contracted to do 40, how does that the payroll data then you have to report that to the business, and the business has a duty of care to support the well-being of their employees.
Absolutely. I think, and there are very clear laws in terms of what those numbers are, in terms of like health and safety, in terms of the hours that you work and when you work them. I think it's 12 hours or 14 hours
of overtime.
Something like in a day. Like you wouldn't want to, I think there is actually a hard limit where you say, no, if you're working like 16 hours, then that's a health and safety.
And I know for a fact that there's, the departments out there within payroll that are doing those kind of hours all the time.
And not only that, I mean, that'd be remiss if I didn't mention 10-hour break rule, because I think that trips up a lot of payroll departments as well, because people who stop a shift and then 4 hours later start another shift, and a lot of those agreements are insanely generous, because they will say double the rate, not double time, double the rate.
What's the difference?
So say like if you're earning overtime at 200%, that's normally non-superable, like you're just getting 2 times your pay, whereas double the rate says whatever rate you were on, double it.
So you'll be a 400.
Yeah, so you could, let's say you meant to earn double time for that because it was rostered overtime, which shouldn't exist. Then it would be double that.
Oh my God! Okay.
And if it's a standard rate, then you're still paying superannuation.
And you need to protect people against that as well, because if they're logging those hours and they're saying, okay, well we're doing double, we're doing 16 hours a day, and you're like, okay, well you shouldn't be. And they're like, well, I need it for extra money because my base salary is not enough. I need the additional. I need that 400%, even if it's only an extra 2 hours a day. I'd rather work those extra 2 hours a day and get that 400% for those 2 hours because my family are dependent on it. There's a whole bunch of like safeguarding and well-being you have to think about.
And I think it gives you like, it's a real almost inflection point. I think once I'm hoping kind of we can't go very far with what we're doing now, and that other companies take that kind of approach, but it very much is a bit of an inflection point in terms of saying what payroll's role is in employee well-being.
Yeah, that's true. That's a whole nother conversation, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, because you can talk about, and I think payroll data and the analytics piece, as you get deeper into it, can inform any part of a HR or a business practice, right? We're already kind of venturing into that with employee well-being, health and safety. I know big conversations I've had for forever is earned wage access.
This is the big conversation, isn't it? Yeah.
In terms of, seeing that data and then, payroll being going, hey, is there something to this? Because in theory, like once you if you saw a pattern, you could then combine it with other data sources, right? Like people accessing EAP, absences, like all sorts of other things that you could think to combine to kind of get a better picture of how an employee is doing. And we talk about the finance piece, right? Like people, saying, hey, I need double time.
There's a lot of people out there that are, if you're on the lower hourly rate and you figured out, I hear about it all the time. You figure out a way to not forge the system, but that if you log an extra few hours every single day, yes, you're exhausted, yes, you're broken, but at least you can feed the kids.
Yeah,
it's hard. But where do you draw the line?
And I think it's there is a much bigger conversation there in terms of what payroll analytics can and should do. I will say I was very impressed. I think this has been around for a while. I don't know if they still do it, but Walmart in the US, they have an app called, I think it's called Even, and it's a similar concept. It's the earned wage access piece, but it also has budgeting tools and finance tools to make people more financially literate.
Yes.
Because, and I'm very big on that, in the industry that I'm in, as well as working in payroll. Because you do hear those stories, right, where like people are living paycheck to paycheck. Sometimes that's circumstantial. There's a lot of things going on there, and I think maybe there is a hard limit to what we can do. But, I think there are probably a lot of people, and I've spoken to a lot of people on very good salaries who still live paycheck to paycheck.
Oh yeah, we were saying this the other day. I mean, I don't live like that now, but up to a certain point, it was, especially with a mortgage, and then, you're kind of chasing how you can earn those extra little bit,
Yeah, and it's a very deep sort of conversation there, in terms of saying, well, if payroll then suddenly has all this data through earned wage access, through absences, doing the deep dives into saying what are people doing, how are they feeling, and mirroring that back through HR and the business, there's definitely a role to me, like, to kind of go, well, yeah, there's definitely, like, payroll data and the analytics piece is definitely a big piece of that puzzle, because that's telling you what people are actually putting in the system. That's the one thing I talk about. Like, if someone suddenly takes all this sick leave, like, obviously the manager is going to be aware of that, but that's going to come through in the payroll system. And if they're exhausting their sick leave, that's definitely becomes a payroll piece, in terms of like saying, well, sometimes people just let them take annual leave, sometimes they've got to take unpaid leave, and
but this is where we standardize the admin again, because you in a business you can go, all right, well, we're noticing that people are capitalizing on all of their sick leave, which they should be entitled to do.
Yes.
If anything happens to your family or yourself, you need to be supported and earn financial as well. Yeah. But there's a certain point where you go, okay, well, we're noticing that we don't provide a good enough ability for somebody in this situation. So we have to sit as a business to have the conversation of, okay, we're noticing that people are struggling to claim their additional leave to support the family. So how do we support our people better? And it just opens the conversation in the boardroom. This is the whole point of this analytics, is it's opening the conversation in the boardroom to say the well-being of our employees. These are the key issues that we're noticing. Yeah, as you said, whether it's sickness or they are they're not logging timesheets for 2 weeks, and then they're popping up and they're doing 30 hours a day, if that's not impossible. But you know what I mean? Like, is there an issue here? Is what can we do to protect these people?
I think payroll the payroll analytics piece can definitely be like the first warning sign in some circumstances. Correct. Right, where people's behaviors change, which comes back to the standardization piece, right? Because if you don't have standard admin, then everything's going to look chaotic, and you're going to see all these variances every week because the rules change every week, or something goes on, or someone says, oh, this is a good idea, I'm going to do this now. So once you have that standardized approach to way people are putting data into your system, because at the end of the day with payroll, the big reliance is on everyone doing their timesheets correctly, putting their leave in when they're taking leave, all these things that I think people know and love, or love to hate. But yeah, and that's where you can kind of see, once you've got those standard processes, those standard behaviors in there, that you're locking down on those things, that you can then start to see the variations that come through in your analytics, to then say, well, everyone's taking sick leave now, what's going on?
Yes.
And it might be everyone's exhausted and burning out.
100%.
It could be COVID-20.
God, don't imagine. Oh my God.
I mean, the data's never going to give you the exact cause in all cases. Sometimes it will. Sometimes you'll have enough. But, you definitely can then at least start the conversation and go, well, hey, we're now seeing this trend.
Yeah, for sure.
Or, what's HR seeing? Are you guys getting calls or anything? Because sometimes they will. Like, some people can be quite vocal about it, but many are not.
Well, yeah, you've got to think that, if you've got, as I said, there's a certain department that, suddenly everyone's sick because you can see on their timesheets they're all logging a few extra hours a week here and there. Then 2 months later, you've got 3 or 4 of them off sick, blah, blah, blah. You can then go, they're down somebody, they need an extra pair of hands. That will then reduce the chance of people leaving. So you'll have, people aren't going to leave. You won't have recruitment costs to replace that person. You're making sure your team are okay. You're watching over them, because some people don't vocalize when they're stressed, and they don't even realize, like, sometimes we're in such a rat race that we are, we just keep going. We just log the hours, and we just do what we got to do. And then it's only when someone brings it to our attention, we're like, actually, for the last 3 months I've done 2 people's work because I'm freaking exhausted and I don't want to do this anymore. And you go, okay, cool, no problem. Well, let's look into getting an extra headcount.
Yeah, and I think for me, like the next level to this, because I think it's very easy for us to then grab this data, because I think, anybody in a payroll manager role can kind of grab this, start picking up, start playing with this data, because this already exists in your payroll systems.
Yep.
I think the bigger thing, kind of the next level that we're talking about now, is when people aren't recording those things, where we're seeing, practices, which I know exists in businesses all throughout. Like it's the classic, I think it's almost an Australian thing, but I'm sure the world has this problem where people are doing all sorts of hours, but they're recording their standard hours. Which, and I know we were talking about annualized salaries and that sort of concept, but this I think is a little different, where someone might be like a wage and hourly employee, but they're either being instructed not to enter their extra hours.
Yeah, we were talking about this, weren't we?
Yeah, or they're just like, oh, I don't want to make a fuss. I actually want to look really good, so I'm just going to put I'm not going to claim this overtime or something like that.
Yeah, because I make sure I advise. So say if I've got temps, right? I advise my temps to log everything to the 15 minutes.
Yep.
So if you go over 10 minutes, don't be annoying. But if you're starting to, or if it's one day, you're doing your 38 hours, and then one day you're doing 39. Okay, whatever. Like if you don't want to, you just want to do 9 to 5. That's okay. But I will say to people, my temps, I'm like, you're paid for up to 15 minutes. Get your money.
Yeah.
Get your money.
Yeah.
Like, do not undervalue yourself. And they'll go, really? Oh, but it's only 9 to 5. No, darling, you're on an hourly rate. You get paid for it. Just, that's the perk of being a temp.
Yeah, it's a big culture thing that you see as well, because, and naturally, like, I think from a business perspective, I get it, right? There's a lot of pressure on cost, productivity, like, small, medium, large, all businesses face that, right? And everyone wants to look like, hey, we're doing amazing. But first point, it's technically illegal because Fair Work says record keeping obligations.
Like what Tony was saying in the thing, record keeping saves everyone's asses.
Yes.
Record keep everything that you have, because it comes baback and you get audited.
Yes,
you got the information there. Yep.
And beyond that as well, you talk about reverse onus of proof under Fair Work, which means basically if your employee says, hey, I've got my spreadsheet hidden in like folder stuff XX or whatever, and they're saying, well, I worked all these extra hours, it's on the employer to prove them wrong. Correct. And if they're not keeping records,
they're coughing.
Yeah.
Because what were we saying about as well, like how you, for example, using Westpac as an example, how say if you've got a centre or a bank, right?
Yeah.
And they are, all their timesheets, they're all maximum 40 hours a week. They're 40 hours a week. They're not doing any overtime, but they're making the most money.
Yeah. And yeah, it's absolutely things like that we're very interested in, just to kind of, because I mean, you're going to get one of two outcomes in my view, right? One, you're going to go, this branch has figured out how to do it really well. And then you can go, well, hey, using payroll analytics, we found the most productive branch in the entire business.
Yep.
And mirrored all their practices and saved billions of dollars.
Yes, in a perfect world, that's exactly what you would do, right?
And made it even more amazing than what it is now. Otherwise, you're going to walk in and you're going to find compliance issues ultimately, right?
Yeah.
Like, and this is where we really want to go and kind of say, okay, we definitely want to foster that culture of doing the right thing all the time, which we do, and it is a really great culture. So, but yeah, it's definitely that stuff that you can start to tease out. The more you get into the data, but it's getting into that data, right, and analyzing it and going, okay, yep, this is what it's telling me. Oh, this looks a bit funny. And what I inevitably find is that payroll managers, payroll ops, payroll processors, whatever you call it, are in the best position to provide those insights.
Yeah, and I think we're now in a world where people are, these things are really important for the businesses to understand. Compliance, legislation, all of these things are so important for the well-being and health and safety of your people. And businesses now can't get away with being like, oh, I didn't know, because it's like, well, it's your responsibility as a business to understand what is happening to your employees, especially if it's outside of the work. Okay, it's harder, but internally in your business, you should know if your employees are overworked and undervalued and stressed out and sick, getting themselves sick. I mean, I know for a fact that I've worked for jobs where I was so mental. I just snotted then on the thing. Sorry. I worked for, people don't know this, but before I got into recruitment, when I was in the UK, I actually worked in a psych ward because I wanted to be a psychologist for like my whole life. I know. I think that's what made me good at payroll recruitment. When you start talking to schizophrenics every day, you start realizing.
Hey, not like that.
But like, I worked for it was NHS funded, but it was like a private hospital. And we were so like, I was doing 70-hour weeks minimum.
Wow.
I was working 13 hours a day minimum, like, and if something went wrong, that would go 14, 15, 16. So because you couldn't go off shift. And I did it for a short period of time, and I did it to afford to come here. But I could imagine if you did that for an extensive period of time, your entire body would shut down.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, you think about the complexity of some of those sort of roles, right? Like ages ago, I knew someone who was a disability care worker, so huge respect. I could never in a million years do that. I like computers.
I think you'd have a hard time speaking to someone with schizophrenia.
But and you talk about like, I mean, I think I'm in banking and finance industry, right? And I'm pretty open in saying that I think our agreement and awards are fairly straightforward. You talk about, some of these other awards that are out there, like SHADS is a classic one.
Yeah, that's the hardest one, apparently.
Yeah, manufacturing is also pretty wild. But there's all these sorts of things. And, I remember she was showing me, she had in her agreement, it was just like, okay, if you stay overnight, it's this rate. If it's in a client's home, it's this rate. If it's in a facility, it's this other rate. If it's like more than 4 hours, it's like, and you're just like,
it's really, and I always say because I've got friends here that work in social work and nursing, and I always say to people, please check your pay. Please make sure that you know what you're meant to get paid at the end of the week or the fortnight or whatever it is, and check your pay, because it's really complex. But these people that work in these jobs, they rely on the fact that payroll people are paying them correctly, and also then looking at what they're doing and protecting them as employees. The information, I think that the businesses should be, because we're talking, obviously your experience with the analytics is predominantly in Westpac, but people listening to this will be from all industries. And I think the analytics piece, I think for everyone should really be looking into the business benefits that you can get, because as you said, these people that are working 70 hours a week, I was 22 at the time, but I was working with people in their 40s and 50s and had kids, and I'm thinking there's no way you'll function. Something is giving, and it's either sleep, food, your own mental health, like whatever it is. And why I wanted this conversation to happen is to protect these people, because businesses need to know what they're doing to their employees.
It's definitely gives you another layer. Like, correct. I mean, it's always interesting, and I know we always talk about payroll having that seat at the table. I think in many ways we are getting there. Just with compliance, cost savings, I think is kind of the next thing, because as you said, right, money, big bold. And I think there's definitely opportunities there that, all organizations are probably leaving on the table by not, looking into that data and seeing what's going on, and how, like, as I say, it's where the rubber hits the road. That's where the money's going out the door. So it's probably where you want to be looking. I think beyond that, though, like you're right in terms of like the well-being piece. We've talked about health and safety. We talked about EAP. We talked about EVP.
We'll go into the EVP stuff because that's really interesting in another bit.
But we also talk about the WGR, another piece we'll probably talk about. I kind of look at it and go, why wouldn't you have your payroll manager with that analytics, bringing that to everything HR's doing, everything rewards doing? It makes sense, one, to have that data there to help make informed decisions. But again, I come back to the thing of that context is king, right? Like, as much as, HR are great, and they have their role, their function, same as rewards, same as any other kind of variation workforce. Like, we can talk about small or large organizations and how, specialist these different teams can be, but none of them are payroll.
No.
And payroll's got that view, they've got that voice. And we
And
know they've got the data.
This is how they get the seat. This is how you guys can get the seat at the table, because you are cost saving. So if you're notifying of the business of frequent overpayments because you're noticing that certain trends in the data are showing that this is where employees are getting a bit sneaky. This is one key point. Two is you're reporting on protecting your employees, the well-being and safety, and all of this kind of stuff. And three, you as you said, the equal, the WGR, equal pay, all of these things are, things that we can talk about with the EVP. We'll go on to talking a bit about EVP, because I think, businesses are really kind of focused on, I know like HR are driving initiatives and things at the moment around EVP because talent is hard to find. And it's not just, so for those who don't know, EVP is employee value proposition. So it's, why would you join this business, right? And I think it's really important for businesses and teams to understand what it is that they can offer an employee, because especially in Australia, in Sydney, the employees in control. Unfortunately, businesses are, there's far more employers looking for people than good people. So the good people are in demand. So why would they join you over another business? So I mean, we talked obviously just very briefly a second ago about how the payroll analytics can go into EVP for then HR to then put that into like a document to then send to employees or potential employees. This is why you should join this business, right? And this is the things that we talk about and monitor on and report on. But how does the reporting play into the employer branding and EVP of a business?
I think thinking about it from that payroll analytics lens, it is very much about those pay outcomes. Like we always talk about, payroll is like the one area that's got to be 100% correct 100% of the time, 100% on time. Otherwise nobody shows up the next day because they didn't get paid.
Correct.
And definitely, there's a role there for, say, dedicated like reward room and ban in terms of like market matching and stuff. Even though payroll can have a hand in that. Thinking about the detailed pay outcomes.
But we were talking about that just a second ago, how, Rem and Benz, they'll say, they benchmark, but then you've got businesses go, well, we pay above the award. And we were just talking about it before when we were like, okay, well, it doesn't matter. There's legalities around. There's a lot of legislation around. I just pay above the award. That it doesn't work like that. You have to prove that you're still above what they're entitled to get.
Yeah, and I think pay above the awards, one of those classic things, right? Because I think if you bother to read any of the awards, those rates aren't really anything to write home about. So I'd say most employers can kind of say that. But I think the first thing for me is, I know we had a big conversation about the annualized salaries thing, which I know flares up from time to time. And I know some companies have fallen foul of that, where they've paid supposedly exorbitant salaries to people, but it's still not been sufficient to cover what they would have earned under the award because of the hours that they work and that they're expected to work because there's a high performance culture or something at that organization.
Yep.
And I think where the payroll analytics piece can come in and help there, I mean, obviously there's the record keeping obligation, which I think we've kind of covered in great detail to kind of say, well, you've got to have all this data to demonstrate compliance. But you can then also present it as if you're paying way too much, is that a market matching issue, or is that somebody's just picked a number out and, say like you're paying some people like 110, 120,000 as an annual salary to say this covers you for overtime and on all these other things under an annualized salary arrangement. But then when you actually add up their hours, they would have earned 95. Now, is that part of your EVP to say that, hey, we pay like $30,000 more than what you would earn in terms of the hours that you would actually work and the things that you would actually do? Because we've seen it go the other way, right? Where people say, oh, we're being super generous with annualized salaries, and then they get audited and it turns out they're underpaying people.
They're underpaying. And I hear about it all the time. I hear businesses that pay way above. I'm not going to obviously name names, but I know that there's a couple of businesses on the market and within the payroll space that offer a really inflated salary and also offer like basically pretty much 100% remote. But the culture is horrific. The job, you're overworked, you're undervalued, all of these things. Like it's not a great place to be. It depends what your priorities in life are, right? But most people want to be valued and want to have part of culture and be part of a business, and you just lose that. So it's very important to understand.
And it's a classic case of, what kind of organization are you, right? Like, I mean, if you're getting that seat at the table, talking to C-suite and board, and say, are we known for paying $30,000-$40,000 more?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you even know that?
Like, what's the brand in the market? What do we want the market to know about us when it comes to salary benchmarking?
But then that analytics piece can help you walk the walk, right? Mm-hmm. Because you can then say, well, maybe we roll those salaries potentially back a bit, mm-hmm. because we know that we're still way above our competitors. Mm-hmm. The annualized salary arrangement based on the hours that they're working. Mm-hmm. Do we need to change that mix of the hours and and the types of people and the number of people that we're bringing in? Mm-hmm. You can have much more informed conversations when you've got that analytics in front of you.
Yeah, agreed.
I think the other piece, which was quite interesting, because I've actually done this for clients in the past, is you get that classic thing where a group of people in the industry complain and say, oh, such and such, my mate at competitor X is getting like 1.5 times what I'm getting paid for the same job. So I'm going to try and get a job there. And, everyone's trying to leave your organization.
Yeah.
And when you dive into those things, like, again, we talked about like the role of reward and market matching and that sort of thing. But when we dug deeper into it, because you think like, everyone's enterprise agreements are common knowledge, like they're available on the Fair Work Commission website. Obviously all the awards are published and public information as well. And when we actually dove into it and we actually took that competitor's enterprise agreement and broke it down, we said, well, in order for them to actually earn more, they'd be working 7 days a week. Mm-hmm. They'd be on standby. They're getting all these extra allowances. They're getting double time. And then when we compared it to the actual hours that people were working, again, using timesheet and pay result data, said, well, if you work these same hours at competitor X, you're actually better off staying here, right? Yeah. And not only that, but you're not working 7 days a week.
Yeah. Oh, and this is the thing. And the people, when they attract the talent, they go, oh, we're paying 20 grand more. So, you leave your job and you paid 150 and then you're going to get 170. They don't tell you. Yeah. They're not transparent. No, they're not transparent with the extra 20 grand. Where is it coming from? They're not just going to pay you it for no reason. They know what the market's paying. Yeah. Why are you going to a company that's 20 grand more? Because they're going to get that money out of you. And it's relevant to every industry, every job. Yeah. Because I even say that here, the people the managers that call me and go, I'm on 180 base and I want to go to a 220 base. And like, they will get their money's worth from you. Gone is your sleep, gone is your family, gone is your taking a lunch break or going for a walk. Like for 2 years, you're going to go in that business and they're going to blood, sweat and tears out of you. So if you want that 40 grand, that's fine. I can get it for you. But please be aware that they're going to milk you for everything you've got.
Yeah. So, I mean, not only were we able to kind of retain a lot of people because they realized, hey, I don't want to work around the clock, or, it was an IT based sort of role. So they don't want to be working on systems that are garbage and they're having to fix them all the time. But it also, you're right. It does let your employees make more informed decisions, right? Because maybe they are in a state of life where it's like, hey, I want to work my ass off because I want to, buy a house or whatever. But you'll definitely have, a lot more people who might go, well, I prefer that flexibility because.
Yeah, I've got kids, I've got younger kids, or I've got, I only got married 2 years ago, or whatever it is.
Or I've got a life otherwise.
Yeah, obviously. Or I play football 3 times a week, and not for me. My life, I don't do anything. I take the money.
but I mean, and I think for all businesses, this is a level of refinement that you can't have without this level of analytics, right?
Yep.
You can kind of go, well, this is.
It's transparency. It's transparency on the expectations from the employer and the employee for the hours worked and the money received. Yeah.
So I think there's real opportunity there for businesses and for payroll managers as well to get in front and say, hey, I can inform you on these things about your EVP. Yep. This is what your people are actually doing. Is that the culture that you want, that people are doing hundreds of hours of overtime? Or do you want people to be flexible? Like, what are you actually driving towards here and are you actually achieving it?
Correct. Yep. And then obviously we talk about payroll reporting and analytics around diversity, equity, inclusion. So obviously it's a big thing that we're talking about, constantly. And obviously as a woman, love it.
Yep.
How can the payroll reporting and analytics support that?
So again, like WGEA is actually a standardized sort of set of measures, right? that gets put out every year, and a lot of companies actually did a really good job, I think, at the website in the last 12 months. It actually is very easy to see.
Yep.
Industry trends and that sort of thing, and it's those numbers vary wildly, and I think in some cases went backwards for some organisations, which isn't good. But I think if you're just looking at a headline number, again, you're not kind of getting that full story. And it's, when it's like law of averages and things, and you have like more male CEOs, for example, earning the big bucks, then that obviously, it's like saying the average Australian salary is like $100,000.
It was like 85 or something, but they include like parts of the country that has, that doesn't have anything.
They're including some very high earners in that average, so that it just drives it up, right? Because I think the median is actually around 60.
No, and 82 or 85, I think it was across the country.
Yeah.
Which I just think to myself, in Sydney is not possible, really. The reality to live in, if you're a single earner, I don't think you could do much with 80-something K, but as I said, it's countrywide, so Sydney is the highest.
Well, it's countrywide, but you do have some very high earning suburbs and high earning people, which will just drive that average.
Eastern suburbs,
roof, right? So, but it's going to be the same with that with Gia thing, where we're seeing that imbalance, and you might see like I think women are statistically more likely to be part time, and like all these sort of things still exist out there in the world. Again, it's about that detail, right? Like you think about, well, what about our role levels? Like if we have, all the boards have role levels, but, are all our level 1s, level 2s, level 3s on the same rate for the same gender? Like, is there a specific thing there? If we have people identifying, with disabilities, are they, for a role that they're in, are they paid the same or equitable? Breaking down full-time versus part-time can be very challenging as well, right? Because you kind of go, well, maybe there's a difference there, but, all the part-timers have higher hourly rates or something, right? Like that granularity again kind of really then, one, gives you a better sense of how you're doing from a WGA perspective, and kind of gives you that target, like whether it's just like, well, maybe women or people from other areas, other backgrounds, or neurodivergence as well. They're working hard, but they're not getting promoted as often, which is something that you can see, and you kind of go, well, what do we do around that? So again, you're kind of just getting a lot more information to make those much better informed decisions. And again, your power outcomes are kind of the first and foremost thing, right? Like the WGA thing is a salary stat. It's what it's about. So
But I think it's important to understand, once again, as a business, to protect your people, because if you have, or if you it's hard, because obviously we try to cap salaries and say, well, this is the maximum I'm going to pay for this role, right? The maximum, because everybody else on my team has paid this or within this kind of budget. And then you go, oh my God, there's literally no one. And it's got the point now where, you've got these 3 people are doing so much extra work. Is it worth me just paying an extra 10 grand for this new person to come in? And hopefully the other team don't find out, which in payroll is impossible, but other areas and stuff, they might be all right. Do the marketing girls talk about it, or do the tech guys all talk about what the salary is? Can I get away with just bringing an extra person in? But how does that affect the statistics of the people coming in, in terms of, is it always the men that are a little bit paid more? Is it the women that are paid a little bit less? Is it single people? Is it married people? There's a lot of reporting to then protect your employees around that as well, right? And it's very important to know.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously going to be a limit to the usefulness of some stats, right? Like I wouldn't want to say single or married people get more or less money for any reason.
Well,
I hope we're not discriminating.
Well, you can say that single people might work harder or longer hours because they just go, I don't turn off. Like I work all the time. But I'm telling you, if I was ever in a relationship, I'd be sitting on the sofa watching TV.
And that is something that a basic payroll analytics will provide you, right? Because you'll see those people do more overtime, or they'll be doing more hours, which might then drive better outcomes in their performance.
Promotions, because they're doing extra fee in their seat. You never know.
So this is all very interesting stuff. I mean, how much an organisation might be able to do about it for any specific statistic is always going to be hard to measure. But I think it comes back to that kind of that EVP piece as well, of kind of going, well, we know all these things about our organisation now. Is that something we need to manage? Is that something we need to change? Or is that something we can even promote and say, yes, we do have really good, pay equity for all of our roles and people that come into the business, or we do have specific programs that are promoting DEI, or promoting people from DEI into higher level roles and offering those opportunities. It comes down to then being able to make an informed decision about your strategy for the EVP.
Yeah, it's great. And I think EVP is something that people are having to, as I said, people are having to think about. Even I'm trying to think about my EVP for the payroll agency, because obviously I want to expand. Why is someone going to join me over something? Obviously, I'm not going to worry about the analytics right yet, because it's just me. I don't even pay myself. I know.
Can't help you there.
Next year's problem. But it's something people are thinking about, and I think transparency around pay, analytics around the Regia stuff, around all of this stuff is what people are now having to report on to attract good talent.
Yeah,
it is a fact.
It's an edge, right?
Correct.
And you see, HR and other departments, who take this on. They do great work, don't get me wrong, but I do think there's an extra edge there in terms of saying, well, what's actually happening on the ground? Because that's where, like we talk about, especially you in recruiting and talking to so many people, that sort of word of mouth can be so powerful.
Correct.
Right?
100%.
And first thing people normally talk about is if they've had a crap payroll experience, or they say, well, they didn't pay my overtime, or we're not encouraged to do this, or something else or other. So it's the first thing people talk about.
For sure. You're obviously talking a lot about the benefits of analytics to the business. How would you, so say a payroll manager's listening to this right now and saying, oh, this is really interesting and I'd love to kind of dig into this myself. How do you start the conversation with a business, your CEO, your CFO, or your HR director? How can they start the conversation about getting analytics into place?
I think the first thing I would do, I definitely am a big believer in poaching what other areas of your business might already be doing. Like, we know data analytics, the whole AI drive, things that are going on in a lot of organizations now. Managers, C-suite boards are already interested in data. So I think the first thing I would do is actually look at what they're already looking at, and how that data is presented to them, because that's the first step in terms of getting them to understand and getting on the same page. And it can be as simple as looking at either the tools that they're using to access that data, the way that data is presented, and I'm talking like bar charts or columns or pies or whatever.
Were you talking about Power BI?
Yes. So Power BI is very popular in the space at the moment. We use it ourselves. So, I'd say there is also a sense of, you want to be aligned with the way your boards and C-suite are talking, right? I spoke about the GPA Summit thing. I think there is a real value in understanding that the strategy, the direction they want to go in, how they're approaching these things, and then almost emulating that in a way to kind of say, well, this is how to communicate these data.
Yeah, so businesses are already having conversations basically around probably EVP and are we focusing on diversity and equity enough? And so you would say get involved in the conversation the best you can. So you listen to where they're trying to drive change. If they are, if they might not be, but if they're not, then they should be. Maybe you could just say, we probably should be having this conversation. It's 2025, almost 2026. We should be having these conversations, and this is how I can best support these conversations.
Yeah, and I do, we spoke about this earlier around the compliance and the cost savings pieces are the two, I suppose, easiest ones to kind of start that ball rolling, to kind of say, well, obviously we want compliant payroll, we want people paid correctly. You don't want everyone going home with half their pay and say, oh, we'll do the other 50% next week because,
whatever.
Whatever. But you're going to need analytics to kind of understand exactly what that means for your organization, right? It's no good saying, well, we should have payroll compliance. There's a sense of, okay, why? What are the areas? Where do we think we've got concerns? This is the data to back it up. And for a lot of people, that can be as simple as Excel charts and stuff, and getting into that. There are more advanced tools like the Power BIs and Tableaus out there as well.
Python
as well, yes. There are a lot of tools that you can kind of, start to gravitate to, start to learn as well, and definitely the Pythons, the SQLs or the SQLs. There are a lot of free resources. It's very easy to kind of pick those up and go.
Yeah.
And like SQL is like the backbone of most payroll systems, right? Like Oracle is all SQL and relational databases in the background. So definitely doing that sort of basic understanding can kind of really help if you're so inclined technically,
and trying to get the ball rolling, I guess, because like that I know because I hear about it all the time. Payrolls doesn't get the seat at the table. It's it's considered still a back office. They're not allowed to have the opinion. They're not allowed to be involved in conversations. They're not allowed. It's very frustrating for myself.
Yeah.
But I think this could be a really good tool for you guys to present to the senior leaders of these businesses or your businesses to say, look, this is the other things that we can provide. It's not just about just paying people and then trying to do it as cheaply as possible. Like these are because let's face it, that's all the most CFOs, all they care about is how much is this going to cost, and like and it's very frustrating for the payroll people, because it's like, well, unfortunately it's not a cheap function anymore. We need the best systems to do things correctly. We need the best of this best, right? But this is another way to have the conversation. It's like, yes, okay, right, my department costs $600,000 a year, $1 million a year with all the salaries, depending on how big you are, just my payroll department. However, if I'm coming to you and I'm saying, well, actually, I've detected through my analytics, I've detected we actually pay $1.5 million a year in overpayments purely because there's an aspect of this that we are not educating people enough on. So I've figured out that the common query is, there's something in the time and attendance system. They're not logging properly, right? They're going every week. We're having the same. There's a handful of people who are having the same issues, and this overtime has led this, this, and this. These are how you're going to have these conversations with these CFOs, because you're going to put it as a, yes, my department costs this much money. However, I can save you this much money.
Yeah. And I think an extension to that as well is we talk about like systems that might not handle data properly, or they might not record certain data points. So what inevitably ends up happening is you have basically a baked in overpayment, like which is this is just the way it is. Like we have an agreement that says X, but we pay a little bit more because we actually don't have the systems and processes in place to do that properly, right? And we talk about like white collar industries that for the longest time didn't record start-stop times because it was about being flexible and all of that. So when you then have entitlements that are time-based, you're making an assumption, or you're underpaying people basically, and you can then say, well, someone's obviously made a decision there at some point. In an ideal world, they've made a decision to overpay by design, but as someone doing those payrolls day in, day out, there's a sense of, is that assumption actually valid? Like, are we actually saving money here? Or is it worth spending the time thinking about, well, what data do we actually need to gather? And, I'm sure payroll managers have been part of these conversations when they go for simple system implementations 100 million times in terms of like, what data do we actually need? So you can then say, well, if we were recording start and stop times or specific flags or whatever that is, you actually then say, well, now we can remove these overpayment assumptions
100%.
and run much more efficient.
And I think once you start, like, obviously I know it's not as easy as said and done, but if you go to your CFO and go, look, I've actually ran some analytics and I can see that we're losing this much money here based on this, and this. You'd be surprised. I keep saying he, which is very annoying because I'm gender profile. I don't like that.
We just spoke about this.
I do it all the time, and I hate that because I'm a feminist. But anyway, your CFO, your HRD, whoever's in charge, and they go, okay, well, that's really interesting. Can we talk more about that? You'd be surprised how quickly, hopefully you can get the conversation going and saying, well, these are also things we can, and then they start going, okay, well, oh, so what you're talking about with this. Let's, and then you sometimes have to build that. I'm not a back office function. I can provide all of these amazing things for this business, and this is how I'm going to do it. So I think it's a really good way to start conversation with basic stuff like, this is how much we're overpaying people, right? But I guess if you're someone who has the seat at the table, right? So you're already business that's involved in conversations, and you've got some, you've got some autonomy. What's the next level of influence that payroll analytics can achieve? So what's that next level for them?
I think, and I think we've spoken about a lot of this, but it's definitely on, that employee wellbeing piece and going, okay, we know all these things that are likely not known by other parts of the business, whether that's health and safety or, an employee care team, for example, in terms of seeing the hours that people are working and if they're overworked, or if, that next level of saying, well, they're not recording their hours when they really should be. there's definitely the WGEA, that big broader piece around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and making sure you're actually getting those outcomes when the rubber hits the road. There's, we talked about the earned wage access as well, and all that extra data that payroll's going to get, and kind of go, well, it's a big conversation about the role of payroll then. Like, you're kind of saying, well, I'm not expecting any payroll person to go out and give people financial advice, because we're specifically trained against that.
Do not do that.
But is there a role, like, and who owns that? Is it going to be payroll? Is it going to be a HR? Is it going to be, a third party assistance program? How does that all work together? Because you're right. I think you said it before, where kind of once you know these things, you can't ignore them.
No, you can't. Yeah. I think we also need to make a point that, like, I reckon any HR people listening to this, go away.
You're banning them.
But I just think that this is a payroll thing. And I think that I'm hearing about it in the market, the way people are kind of latching on to this data, this is really interesting, we can present, and HR are taking it and presenting it. Please payroll people, try and keep hold of this, because yes, HR people have to ultimately roll out communications, that it's their job to ensure that, the work health and safety, all of these things are in place. But this is your data, payroll people. This is your responsibility to report on this. Don't let HR take that from you, please.
I keep saying context is king, right? Like, HR absolutely have a role in the organization and can do a lot of great work, but they're not day in, day out processing payroll, seeing that data come through, having those conversations with employees when things go wrong. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're involved, and they can be brilliant at that. But I think I said something, and I know this isn't true of all HR people, so apologies, HR people. But they're not finance, mathy.
They're not necessarily numbers people,
which is fine. Like, I don't necessarily want the finance guy doing HR content.
Everyone's got their avenues and their boxes.
Yeah, and I think this is where payroll really needs to be at the forefront, right?
Have the voice, please. Stand up for yourself.
Because you're going to be able to talk to you. Like, I don't know how long we've been talking, but you can have these conversations in depth, at great level, at great detail, and that's where your insights are deriving from, right? They're not coming from we paid 10,000 people this month. Like, cool. It's about, like, okay, the overtime is here. It was somewhere else. Like, we've had conversations about, like, if people just record overtime as a number of hours, did they work that in the morning or at night? You normally think, maybe they worked it afterwards, but if the morning is a better pay outcome, you're suddenly in an interesting compliance conundrum, right? And then you're coming from that of well, if we recorded stop times, we wouldn't have this problem.
And it's also it's not HR's responsibility because then you start getting into payroll. It's payroll's responsibility. What I would say is, if you're interested in doing the analytics, you record the data, make sure that you're recording it with your name, with your emails, with your information, and then you can roll it out to HR and get them, or finance, or whoever it is, to roll out the information you're not going to do the EVP. Your job is to get the data to then HR to put together the EVP or whatever it is. However, please try and maintain control of this the best you can, because I'm hearing about it already, unfortunately, that it's not, you guys are, and you have to stand up for yourself and stand up for your payroll. This is your data, guys. Please.
It's really interesting, right? Because you talk to a lot of, and I have had people come into my team who haven't been payroll people, they've been data people. And I've said, all right, I'm going to teach you payroll. Let's see how we go. And by the way, they've picked it up brilliantly. And they're now, I'd call them payroll people any day of the week. But when you get data people building these things, or people who don't work with that data day in, day out, they'll produce all these wonderful things. You can produce dashboards for days, create all these things. But, and we talk a lot about in training in data and thinking about data storytelling, very popular term, in terms of like, well, what's that actually telling you? And what are you going to do? And, is that, predictive or prescriptive analytics? And, you can get into all those sorts of conversations with data people. And you usually need to have that conversation of, okay, what's the story behind it? What's this actually telling me? What's going on? What should we do about it? With payroll analytics is interesting, because I kind of almost come at it from the other way and say, you guys know what's going on. You guys know the story. The bit here now is presenting that in such a way that others can understand it
Mm-hmm.
and go, oh, wow, we are actually spending too much money. We're overpaying people for no reason. You know, we're not capturing the correct data points to pay our people properly and to prove that we're paying our
Mm-hmm.
people properly. You know, we actually have a really good, you know, proposition to say to people might have really good work-life balance,
Mm-hmm.
even though they might earn more total dollars at a different company.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they'll earn more for less work
Mm-hmm.
almost.
Yes, 100%.
So, you know, and then of course we've spoken about, you know, the earned wage access, you know, the additional data there, the types of leave people are taking, and if that's a health and wellbeing flag, or just too many hours being a health and wellbeing flag. You know, I think we were talking about the domestic violence leave, you know, which is now baked in as an entitlement for everyone. You know, and when people take it and how they take it as well, because somebody might not feel comfortable putting in domestic and family violence leave into the system. You're going to get all that insight from the payroll data, you know, building that analytics up, you know, and then being able to actually articulate it and talk to them. Because what I do find with HR and anybody else who takes that payroll data out of payroll and then builds reports with it, is that they can't then talk to it in great detail, whereas payroll people can.
Yes, absolutely agreed.
And my point still stands that I think taking sensitive and confidential data out of payroll to put it anywhere else can be a bit of a risk there as well, right?
For sure.
So, yeah, I think there's lots of reasons for payroll to own this, to own the story of it.
Correct.
You know, and then also build that analytics capability, build that analytics practice into, you know, your strategic view and message to your boards and your C-suites, because then that gives you the seat at the table all the time.
Correct.
Not just.
I love it. I think it's fantastic. I think this is an amazing way for you guys to be seen as way more useful than just a back office function. Would you be happy for people to reach out to you if they had any questions?
Absolutely.
I'll put Brendon's LinkedIn on the show notes in the body of the thing. So if anyone wants to reach out to you and say, look, obviously I'm keen to get this started, or you know, what's the first thing that you would potentially report on? Because, you know, we're trying to talk about strategic. Obviously I've got the event in November I'm putting together for people to go from operational payroll to strategic leaders, and this is going to be something I'm going to talk about as well, and talking about how to present data to C-suite people to get the respect and the understanding of what it is that you guys do. It's all just tools to make sure that you guys get the respect you deserve, to be honest.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
All right, well, thank you so much for coming.
No, very welcome. Thank you.
We've talked a lot. I probably have to cut a lot of this out. But thank you so much for joining me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mel.
We can just do a test and then we can listen to it back. So, because the only thing is like my side profile, right? So like the front on, it's great. And then side profile, I've just got like the chin.
Oh, no, it's not that bad.
It's like, you know what I mean?
We need like the 3/4 sort of view.
We're just
talking to the camera.
It's just like talking like this. I also said, can you turn the lights up a little bit? They were like, no. I was like, okay, well, now we're going to fall asleep. Right. Hello. So it can be just tested like that, right?
Testing. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, all good.